This is OneEye bringing you the next episode of the Multitapped podcast. Tonight we're doing round 2 of RPGs, and as you notice, we have more than a few guests tonight. Originally, Jay Dubious from Dubious Reviews was going to be here, but unfortunately, he could not make it, got called into work. So in his place, we are joined by the fantastic Mike Tendo of Dude, You Haven't Played That Yet. And then,
Dude, you haven't played this game.
It's so hard not to. I'm sorry. It must be some weird Canadian in me. And then Avalanche Jared from Avalanche Review. Joining us from last time, we also have Daria from Daria Plays and Derek from Super Derek. Hey, now, it's pretty rare that we get Avalanche Jared in a show. He's kind of tough to schedule. It's pretty rare to get him around. And for those,
I'm a commodity. It's hard to get a hold of me, honestly.
It's true. It's, that's export. It's quality. It's the best. Caviar. Anyway, point being, if you're familiar with his show, then you should understand he's a good guy to have on about RPGs. He's got a wide taste in them and everything like that. So if you haven't, don't let his demeanor fool you. Now, out of curiosity, Jared, we mentioned this last time and everyone got mad at me for asking it, but I'll go ahead and ask it of you. Just to start off the show, since you weren't here last time, what's, I would say, your favorite 2 or 3 RPGs? What are some good examples to define your taste in RPGs? Let's hear it.
I should have seen this coming. Wow. Okay, so, all right, I have to immediately right off the bat just ruin it all and say Final Fantasy VII is definitely in the running. Goes without saying at that point. I think most of my favorite RPGs are on the PS1, honestly. Final Fantasy Tactics are one of my favorite RPGs of all time to just sit down and play through. And third one, wow. God, that's rough. All right, I'm going to have to say, as far as like me getting something out of it, something that's important to me, Chrono Cross. For sure.
Chrono Cross?
Oh. Yeah.
That's a good choice.
It's a weird game. I won't say it's the best playing RPG ever, but something about the music and the story and like the general, like just the feel of the game as a whole is just super important to me for some reason. I don't know. It just brings up a lot of cool memories.
I'm glad somebody mentioned it. I can't honestly remember if we talked about it last episode or not, but I picked it up last year when I was on a trip and replayed it a little bit. And honestly, the thing that really surprised me about the game is I love the battle system. The magic layers, I'm so into it. It felt so intuitive and natural. Like they never really break it down or hold your hand. They just kind of throw you right into it, and I never got confused.
Yeah,
it was something I really like about it.
I love that you never even have to grind in the game. And some people probably don't like that, but I really like the fact that you only ever level up in the game when you defeat a boss. So you never have to worry about, how many enemies you fought along the way.
Well, when you have 100 characters to juggle, it probably would have been just really sadistic of Square to make you level them all up.
Yeah,
that's true.
Yeah.
Well, they did it in Suikoden. They didn't give a damn about that.
Well, Konami is known to be dicks, so...
This is also a fair point.
Yeah, I mean, in all seriousness, though, the fighting engine in Chrono Cross is probably one of the most intuitive, just below the actual active time battle system. Like, as soon as you get in there, the first couple of commands you put in, you're like, I know everything about this fighting from now on. The only thing that's left is, like, just under the surface, you have your elemental fields and then your traps, and that's all you have left. And throughout the game, that stays interesting, even though you figure it out, like, the first 10 minutes.
Yep.
Well, I like it too because it makes sense and it adds a little bit more depth to it because you're like, oh, I need to be stacking these elements to magnify powers, but what if I need to cast a heal or different utility spells? I don't know. It makes it like a little balancing act. You know what I mean? It's fun.
Well, here's how I look at it, and this is kind of what a lot of people don't see: is Chrono Cross is the Chrono Trigger of the PS1. Like when you look at Chrono Trigger, it was ass backwards as far as design goes from any RPG available on the console. I mean, you had these battles taking place on the actual field, and then the active time system was just so weird, and then the double and triple text. And it was just a really weird idea of switching between these different time periods. And then you take Chrono Cross, and it's the same thing, but completely different. Everything that's in the game is being done in the weirdest way possible that's different from any other RPG. They followed the same design documents. They just didn't repeat what was in there. They just went on the core idea of it. So they went with incredible music, which is Chrono Trigger and Chrono Cross, two of the best soundtracks ever made by human beings. And then the fighting engine has to be different. It has to be unique. And they did that, nailed it perfectly. You may not like it, but you got to admit that is the most unique fighting engine, that you can think of in an RPG. So I think they're both the same exact game in the completely opposite ways.
Did Matsuda do the soundtrack for Chrono Cross? I know he did the soundtrack for Chrono Trigger.
No, what's his name? I know Nobuo Uematsu actually helped out with some tracks, but he's not listed. He's not credited, which is weird.
On Chrono Trigger, he is, because he did the jet bike theme song, and I believe when you're in the
that makes sense.
When you're in the trial, yeah, it's very
the jet bike
Uematsu
theme song. Yeah, definitely is.
And I think in the sewer as well, when you're in the future, like those, all the tracks that are Uematsu are very clearly him.
Yeah,
but. So here's my thing about Chrono Cross. I'm probably going to get a lot of hate. I don't like Chrono Cross, and there's a very there's a very specific reason.
Whatever.
Why.
I'm team fuck Chrono Cross. So
okay, all right.
Somebody else say it.
See, I love it, but I understand why people don't like it. Though.
Here's my thing, though. I can't play RPGs with like 100 characters, like Suikoden and Chrono Cross and anything like that. I need a small cast of characters that I can fall in love with, like 7 to 10 characters. Your standard Final Fantasy VII Chrono Trigger style, as far as characters go.
Yeah, I get that.
Yeah, it's just too much. The only game that I will say that kind of breaks that rule is Valkyrie Profile. That's one of my favorites. I haven't beaten it, but that's one of my favorites.
No, that's a good game.
I can understand that. For me, Chrono Cross, as far as the multiple, and same thing with the Suikoden series, at least the first two on the PS1, is the characters kind of end up being like your completionist goal. Like, oh yeah, I want to finally get that, because if somebody has like face art for their dialogue box, you're like, okay, I can get that guy as a character. So it becomes less of like, who am I going to use in a battle and get like attached to as a character. It's more of a collectible, quest for me as far as that goes. Some of the like in Chrono Cross, there are a couple of characters who they oddly focused on. Like, I forget her name. She was a blonde girl, and she uses her bare hands to fight. And it turned out that she had, is that her? She had pigtails, and she has a twin sister in the alternate timeline.
Okay, so are you talking about Kid?
No, it's not Kid. No. I'm not that.
I'm sure he'd remember Kid.
Yeah, because she's one.
I loved her. Yeah. You know what I did is every time I start a new game, I rename her as Kip, because I accidentally did that the first time I played the game and got used to her name being Kip, and that just sounds cute as all hell. But they have certain characters that they did pour story into, and you just wouldn't think about it. Like, if you take one character who exists in one timeline to another, you may meet another version of them or something like that. And then a lot of story will come from that you just wouldn't see coming. But for the most part, I kind of treat it like, oh, can I get this guy or not? I usually don't even use most of them in battle. I had 3 characters I used all the time. Nobody else I even touched.
I had a problem with Crosses, even though it had all these characters. It's like they failed to make any of them interesting. Like, there wasn't any one person storyline that was worth even paying attention to.
I disagree. You can
disagree, but the game sucks.
Okay, so like Jared said, there are some people that it does oddly focus a whole lot on, and one of those people is Glenn, who is totally awesome. Mm-hmm. And he has got a pretty compelling story. Actually, all of the Karsh and he had a pretty good storyline as well.
What were their accents? What were their terrible, terrible accents?
They didn't actually have accents.
Judge it on accents.
Yes, you can. If you gotta read that game, and
the accents were pretty terrible.
Dog speak.
But not everybody had them.
Kid's gonna kick your arse to the moon. Come on.
No, fuck
to the moons.
One of my favorite lines in Chrono Trigger, which I still laugh about it to this day because I didn't realize it when I was a kid, was the ice cream line. When Princess Nadia gets captured. Marley? I don't know.
I always just say Marley, but I'm in a Marl mood.
Yeah.
No, I thought it was Marl.
Yeah, I always thought it was Marl, too.
I rename my people anyway, so it doesn't really matter what the game calls them.
I try to, the first time I play through, if the characters' names come up, I try to always play through the game with the characters.
Exactly. That's what I do. That's exactly what I do.
But that line when she's, I guess she's captured and you're going through the kitchen or whatever, and you meet up with the cook or one of the people there, and they say, she wants this ice cream stuff like really badly, and it's spelled like eyes, like eyeballs, and then cream. And in my head, I was like, I don't get it. Like when I was like 11 when I first played it, I was like, what does that mean? And then like years down the road, I went back and replayed it. I was like, I get it.
I got
eyes cream.
You got me. That's one interesting thing to talk about. Because I'm the same way. I never rename my characters if I can help it. Surge is always Surge. You know what I mean? Chrono's always Chrono.
My Surge was Sergio. Like I don't always really go way out in renaming them. Sometimes I just alter them slightly, but I always kind of give them a little personal touch. Like Kid was Lee, Leigh. The other chick that was like your childhood friend who had like the frying pan. She was my required Daria. There's always one of those in there somewhere.
I could see her being a Daria. That kind of fits. I could see that. Yeah, I don't know. For some reason, when I start the game up, I want these characters to be brand new to me. See, This is a huge issue I have with Western RPGs. Is I want to sit down to like a story and have it be fed to me and experience it for myself. But I don't want a hand in creating it as much because there are people that like make. They make their money by sitting there and trying to make the story that I'm gonna like, and then in like a more Western RPG where I create my character and I make all the decisions. Now I'm making the story, and I am not a storyteller. And you know what I mean? It's not this surprise to me.
No, you're doing all the work.
Yeah, and I don't want to do that. They get paid to do it. I'm sitting there for free. I paid to get the game.
Right.
You know what I mean?
I'm with you on that.
I tend to find that just the translated names are usually awful, especially Square. Like, I don't know.
It depends.
I'm playing this epic fantasy, and you name the guy Cloud, and that just is taking it completely.
Really? I thought his name was so cool.
No, that is not cool.
I mean, I wouldn't, like, shake someone's hand if their name was Cloud in the real world, but in video, that's cool.
That doesn't strike me as epic fantasy. That's just really shitty naming.
It depends on changing the names of the characters. I'm with you when it comes to... going through the game the very first time, I always never change the names. But I do remember two or three instances when I did. After I finished Chrono Trigger and I went back to get the multiple endings, every time I restarted it and I had to name Frog, I would name him Glenn.
I could see that, yeah.
And I'm trying to think. Final Fantasy VII. When I played through it a second time, I renamed Cloud Mike, and I named Barrett Bo. It's a long inside story, but I'll keep it short. Basically, when I was in high school, I found my dad's porno tapes, and I remember watching one.
Good story so far. Keep going.
Yeah,
right?
On track.
I remember watching one, and one of the characters, this big black guy, called himself Bo Bigley.
That is a cool name. That is a cool name.
You should Google Bo Bigley and see what he's doing now.
Right? But the way he would say it in the porn, he was just like, Bo Bigley. Like, he was so into it. And so, for a long, long time, like, I would always, like, walk around and, me and a friend of mine who we both watched the porn and we laughed about it and everything. When my dad was around, my friend would be like, hey, Bo, what's up? And my dad would go back to him and be like, hey, Bo, what's going on? And so it became this running joke, and my dad had absolutely no clue where we were getting this name from. So when I started playing Final Fantasy VII, I changed Barrett's name to Bo.
That makes sense. All right. So if we could summarize RPGs and pornography. Right here for you.
There you go.
Okay.
Yeah, pretty much.
Rarely, if ever, apart from where I'm hearing it.
Hey, I mean, we were just talking about the whole uncensored thing with Tales of Berseria and Star Ocean 5, so
there you go.
It's a good segue.
But see, that's still just privilege. That's just all that is.
Yeah.
Clearly. You're using your white privilege to try and derail the conversation to another topic.
Listen, I'm nothing but cis scum.
Well, have you know, I had something to contribute to this.
Oh, beautiful.
Sweet Home, guys, come on! Sweet Home is a game that people often will encourage you to rename your characters to people that you know, because it's also a survival horror in a way. As Jared knows, because he helped me review the game.
I did.
I would say that's
survival horror RPG. Oh yeah, it's definitely an RPG.
I can see the appeal in killing off your close and personal friends. If you saw my review I did of the game, though, you might notice my characters were all Ghostbusters, because I think that really just fit.
It makes a lot of sense, though.
I can see that too.
There was a lot of gender swapping, however, because most of the characters in that game are actually women, so they all got sex changes.
Modern revision before it was released. See, the only game that I ever renamed any of the characters in, is the Pokemon games. I don't know what it is, but my God, is it? I'll pick a theme and I run with it. Like, for example, in my current game of X or whatever it is, right? The main character is named the Dolly Poopka after our good friend Jay, and then every single Pokemon I catch is a different Xbox game, and it's just so good. It's just so satisfying. Or
that is brilliant.
Little things like that. Like, I've never done the renaming your thing in like a mainstream RPG. Like, especially, and it's funny that you mentioned naming Frog Glenn, because in my head, like, I can never picture him as anything else. And like, Frog's theme is my favorite. I name him Ribbit. You know what I mean? It's sort of like those people who are like, I'm naming my Red 13 to Noke, and I'm like, oh my God, fucking kill yourself. Like,
I forgot about that one.
Yeah, like it's just because it's a bait, you know. It's like one of the plot reveals. Like, your name's your name. Like, oh my God, no way.
That's one I did too.
Yeah, I'm a purist. Sometimes I see people who will like start up a game of Final Fantasy VII and name Cloud their name, and I'll try. Every once in a while I'll like start up a game like, oh, Jared, cool, and I'll be playing it. And I'll be like, I fucking hate this game now. Now this dude's name is Jared, like some lame dude in Florida.
You can't do it the first time.
Even if I do it and I already know what the story is, I just feel so. I don't know. I can't.
Could you imagine how difficult it would be? Could you imagine how difficult it would be to follow Final Fantasy VII if you renamed Cloud Zack? Like if you were some kid named Zack growing up on Final Fantasy VII, you name it Zack.
Oh my God, that could ruin like
Zack is really
the entire second disc. You'd have no idea what was going on.
This is totally relevant. It's not RPG related, but this is relevant. So the first game I ever played on Xbox 360 was Gears of War, right? And when I was in high school, my nickname was Dom, because Don is short for Donald, and my name's fucking Donovan. It's not Donald. So everyone's like, oh, we'll just fucking call you Dom. And so we're playing Gears of War. I make my profile on my friend's Xbox, and, my profile name's Dom. And we load in, I'm the second player, and, Mark is, Dom, get over here. I need cover. And I'm like, holy shit, this is the next level of video games.
Gotcha, man.
That's awesome.
I can't wait for the day that they can do that, like, very well.
Hey,
remember the old days where they'd be like player 2?
Nintendo is well ahead of you guys. I installed Miitomo the other day, and it's like they voice acted it perfectly with my name. It's fantastic. Have you guys checked this out yet?
Yeah.
Ooh.
Oh, it's so immersive.
It's pretty fun. I mean, it's a time waster.
You asked yourself
joking. I don't think I could take you seriously right now. How badly was it?
It's awful.
Oh, thank God. Oh man,
I
thought you were just being super nice about it.
It's a time waster. That's all it is. It's not anything.
You know what? Honestly, if Nintendo has a hand in it, I'm typically not interested anyways, but definitely not interested in that. Even if somebody else made that, it just seems ridiculous.
No, actually, Fallout 4 did do something like that, though, didn't they? Where if you named your character something, it has some database of names, and the robot that you can have as your companion, he'll like refer to you by name.
Well, that makes sense, because then you can it's already a robotic voice, so.
Yeah, it doesn't matter if it's a little stilted.
Yeah.
So I gotta ask,
that's clever.
Are you an heiress or an heiress?
Well,
Aaron,
I mean,
because this is America.
Yeah, we do live in America. Aaron. Oh,
Aaron. I just changed it a little to an N.
Okay.
It was still AERIN.
How dare she gave her life for you.
I'm just Eris.
Whatever. Hate that bitch.
Oh yeah, What you're one of the very few people on Earth who actually hate Eris.
I didn't care for her either.
I'm raising my hand on that one. I've always been a big believer in. I hate that style of heroine design. Like, literally, I would have a dagger any day of the week over fucking Renoa or Eris. I don't give a fuck. Like, I like
Renoa was a cool, strong character.
I didn't like Renoa, man. For the first 3 discs, she was dead weight. Like, Dagger gets right around to it. After
all right, here's
Team Tifa. That's all I'm gonna say.
Team Tifa, dude.
I liked Tifa, but also at the same time, there was something about Aerith that I always liked, and I never called her Aerith because I didn't have access to the internet until I had well past beaten Final Fantasy VII. You know, I had dial-up and stuff, but at the time, you know, you're not wasting your time trying to figure out. You're going to fan pages and everybody's putting up little JPEGs, and then there's like a GIF of the dancing baby in the bottom right-hand corner.
I don't remember her having much of a personality other than just being like the sweet character that Cloud kind of maybe liked. I don't know.
It went a little deeper than that because when you took her home and then found her backstory and seen what she had went through, the sweetness kind of seemed like a really cool coping mechanism for like a really shitty world. And she kind of knew she was different and people were after her, but she maintained this sweet demeanor. Yeah. I thought she was a cool character. I can understand like people being like, "Oh yeah, I just wasn't into that character." But then there's people online. It's like fucking Eris deserved to die. And I just can't understand.
No,
she did nothing.
Those people are called trolls.
Yeah,
this was never like that. Trolling existed scientifically. I remember seeing that on the internet.
There has never been. The internet and trolling was just at the same time. They broke.
One was created. Some guy was like, "I'm gonna."
It's a chicken or the egg. Which was first, internet or trolling?
I liked Eris. I liked Tifa way more. Yeah, and I wasn't a fan of Yuffie.
Tifa had a couple of assets.
You say Yuffie.
No one liked Yuffie.
Who says Yuffie?
I see what you did there, Derek.
Some people do say Yuffie. I've said Yuffie since the beginning.
Oh yeah.
Oh really?
Is that correct? Or is
I always said Yuffie.
I always said Yuffie too. Once again, this is America, though, so it's tough to say. But yeah, I was always Yuffie.
I don't remember her other name, but I guarantee it was not Yuffie or Yuffie.
What other name?
Whatever I gave her. I don't remember.
Oh, stupid.
Annoying little whore. I don't think that fit in the dialogue box.
I couldn't stand her.
Oh,
that's always something. Just a little thought that's always driven me crazy about Final Fantasy VII is I constantly hear people bitch about the objectification of Tifa, but they never say shit about Yuffie. And it's like if you look at the character designs and how they talk and act in the game, like it's not even close, and it drives me crazy. We won't even really get into it, but I've never liked Yuffie either as a character. She's always crazy.
Getting to
She's that late game character you don't care about. Final Fantasy always has one of those.
Oh,
At least she was better looking than
I always thought Kate Sith was the late game character you didn't care about.
I love Quina, for the record. Blue mages are my shit, and
we've had this conversation before.
We've totally,
and you have an actual mental issue.
I can't. The character design for 9, I couldn't get into it.
Really? No, he's the only character that wasn't good. That was the only one. I named him Queasy, by the way.
What was the female lead? Garnet?
Yeah, Garnet.
Yeah. Dagger on the streets. Garnet the sheets.
We had a whole conversation about Dagger. I guess you weren't following.
I always used to call her Mini Tifa. Because she had like Tifa's face and hair, but she was like super teeny tiny. I don't know.
She was my darling.
Her hair changed. Her hair changed.
It did. She cut it.
I saw it with a dagger.
But what do you know?
I love how that
Vivi
was the
is
time.
the only character.
I want to get serious.
Vivi could have carried that game by himself. Why has there not been a spin-off Vivi game?
Vivi's story stopped like 20 hours in, though.
Who cares?
Okay,
he was a cool character. I like Vivi.
This is something I kind of want to get into with this group, because I know I've talked about it with Multitapped. I know this is like every 3 Saturdays it comes up. But what is everyone's opinion about Final Fantasy IX? Because in all seriousness, and it was mentioned in chat, and I'm going to say it here, it's probably my favorite, not counting Tactics, PS1 Final Fantasy. And by that I mean pretty much no contest too. Like, the story's great. I like how the characters handle mechanically. The reason I like them so much is they remind me of the archetypes from the older games. Like, Freya feels exactly like a Dragoon. Quina feels exactly like a Blue Mage. Armrant feels exactly like a Monk or something like that. You know what I mean? Like, the game mechanically felt amazing.
Well, that's what they're going for. It was just a next-gen 8-bit game. They're like, let's take the 8-bit Final Fantasy and put it on PS1 and give it a grown-up story, and that was Final Fantasy 9, and that's all it needed to be, and that's why it was beautiful.
If Square Enix gave half a shit that they cared about, as far as throwbacks go for Final Fantasy 9, like if they cared half as much about that now as they did then, that would be awesome.
Like, I feel like Bravely Default is in the honor of going back to that kind of like.
I call it the best Final Fantasy in years. That's literally how I pitch it to people.
I feel like it was dragged out of Square Enix.
I've used those same words to
kicking and screaming
it,
though.
So
they did not want to release it.
And I like how they acted like, oh yeah, now that we found out traditional RPGs are cool, we'll stop with the whole, releasing crappy games. And like, psych, gotcha.
Shit. The only thing I'll say about 9 is a lot of the characters looked and felt like little kids. And my big thing with RPGs, and I've talked about this to death on Pixel Tunes Radio, I can't play RPGs when you play as little kids. Late teenagers, I'm okay with. Anything later than like 16, 17, I'm fine with. That's one of the reasons why I don't like Bravely Default or Bravely Second, Earthbound, like all those RPGs that everybody loves with kids in them. Can't do it. I can't relate. That's what it is. And I've always been like that.
I guess you're talking mostly about kind of the aesthetic, how they got the big heads and little bodies. You've seen
the chibi style, yeah.
Yeah, but specifically, you've seen the like CG character models for Final Fantasy VI.
Yeah, and they look like,
that's like exactly
style.
What
I know.
I'm just saying, it's like Final Fantasy 9 was doing exactly that. It's just now you can actually see them. It's like technology had advanced enough to be like, oh, well, now they're not sprites. They actually look like that.
Yeah, I think it looked a little weird bringing them into like a place where there's more pixels to represent them. Super Deformed looks cool, sprite based, because that was a cool style.
Right.
When you go into 3D, I would say the character design in Final Fantasy 9, like Zidane was supposed to at level 99, he was supposed to be this badass, but he's like this little midget running around. Like I didn't see that. Final Fantasy 9 was a good game. I think all the PS1 Final Fantasies were really great RPGs, but they were all completely separate, and I never compare one to the other. Yeah. Like I really get into the atmosphere and the environment of Final Fantasy 7. I like the whole post-apocalyptic, post-technology
cyberpunk
kind of thing.
Yeah,
it had a very dystopian cyberpunk feel, and you had your guns and swords and your machine guns and sorcery, right? I like that. And that's why I kind of gravitate more towards that. Final Fantasy VIII felt like a fucking Final Fantasy J drama, so I could appreciate that aspect of it.
I did not like 8. Like we can get into it here in a minute if we want to, but I cannot fucking stand.
I can see that. I can understand why people don't like it.
I never played a few hours.
I haven't played it, so
all right. So my first RPG experience, if we're not counting Zelda, is Chrono Trigger. Played it to death. Got almost all the endings, loved it. 7 came out, and I had already had a PS1, rented it, and just ended up buying it. And I loved it, and it definitely became one of my favorites. When 8 was coming out, before it came out, I got hyped about it.
We all did,
I bought the toys, like I bought the strategy guide, because they released all that stuff way before. And the game came out, and I was playing through it, and I was like, it's kind of cool. And I don't want to spoil it for the listeners, but there's a part in the game where they kind of jump the shark involving the orphanage. That's all I'm going to say.
Oh, yeah, no, it was ridiculous. It was
ruined the game for me. Totally ruined it. I stopped playing. I sold the game, ended up buying it again, got up to that part again, got pissed off all over again, sold the game, did a table flip, sold the game again, rebought it again, and now it's not leaving my collection, and I have the strategy guide, and I'm going to go through it, and I'm going to get to that part, and I'm going to be like,
you power
it's tough,
through it.
man. It's hard. Literally, the end of disc 3 is where I put the game down every single time.
Yeah,
I get Gilgamesh, and I'm like, sweet, and then I do the boss fight, and I'm just like, wow, I'm done. Like, I just turn around and walk away.
I can't blame you. I cannot blame you. Yeah.
Was it you, Jared, who said that the game is pretty much just a J-drama? Because that's literally what it is. It's playing a fucking soap. And, I don't know, man. I had such a hard time getting into it. My sister and I used to always argue about it because it's her favorite, but it's just like, I have a hard time getting into whiny characters. It's the same reason I never understood people's obsession with The Catcher in the Rye. I was like, why the fuck do I want to read this book? It's just a teenager whining for 100 pages.
But do you have a favorite character?
Out of 8? Yeah. Irving.
Okay.
Yeah, Irving was a cool character.
A lot of people like Irving. I'm going to say Quistis.
She's my second. Quistis is really cool.
I thought she was really cool.
She was a cool character. I never used her in battle, though.
Oh, really? I much like Tifa, she was pretty much always in my party. I really like the whip. The whip is very Castlevania-ish.
It comes down to aesthetics for me. Most of the time, it's not even about how useful they are in a party. Like in Final Fantasy VII, it was Cid, Yuffie, and Cloud because I enjoyed their look and the type of weapons they used. Even though one wasn't more effective than the other, that's what I get into. So when I play an RPG, or even when I play a fighting game, like when I get good and I sit down and spend like 30 hours really learning a character, it's just one that looks cool to me and is aesthetically pleasing.
I do that too. I will choose the cool looking character, or even the character that I identify more with. I will always choose them over somebody who's more useful tactically. You know, because let's face it, the games aren't that hard. I mean, you can beat it with pretty much anybody.
Yeah.
So I might as well go with the people that I like. Yeah,
that's how I do it. Final Fantasy VIII, I can see why people don't like it, and for the longest time, I was on, I had a real hate on for Final Fantasy VIII because I was coming out of Final Fantasy VII. Now, I was lucky enough to start out in the classics. I had a cousin who was really into the early Super Nintendo Final Fantasies, and when I would come over, he would play them, and he would name one of the characters after me, and it started this real early, 8-year-old love for RPGs. So I've been playing RPGs this entire time, ever since the Super Nintendo era, and then I get to Final Fantasy VII. Why I listed one of my favorite RPGs, literally changed my life. I'd never been invested in characters before, and then Final Fantasy VII came out, and it just blew me away. It was incredible.
Oh, it's a game changer, literally a game changer.
It really was. I mean, regardless of who doesn't or does like it, you have to admit every RPG after Final Fantasy VII was they could thank Final Fantasy VII for their success. Every game takes from Final Fantasy VII in one way.
In the U.S., I can agree with that just because it opened up the market, but I wouldn't say in Japan, definitely not.
No, yeah.
You know?
I think it was the first game where you could have a relatable feeling for characters that, especially in an RPG. I mean, you could kind of relate to Glenn and Chrono Trigger and
Lunar, came out in '89. I mean,
but my first experience with the Lunar series was the PS1 remakes, though. So I got into it kind of later on. I never even owned a Sega CD, so
me neither.
I couldn't even touch those games. So for me, starting out a really moving RPG. Now, I grew up really poor, so I had a very limited selection of games, and when I got them, I was only able to rent them. So even with Final Fantasy VII, when Final Fantasy VII came out, I rented that 6 times until my parents said, okay, this is getting a little fucking expensive. And they bought the PC version for me. But my whole thing is I was in love with Final Fantasy VII. And still to this day, that's probably one of my favorite games of all time. Soundtrack, story, characters, everything all put together. It has its problems. But then I had all this hype for Final Fantasy VIII because Final Fantasy VIII was like Final Fantasy VII's story and then Resident Evil 2's graphics put together for me.
Right, yeah.
So I was super into that, and then I played it, and oh god, the fighting engine, I just couldn't get into it. And not so much the fighting, but the
very tedious, the magic draw system.
Yeah, the draw system was oh god, you didn't even grind anymore. You drew grind. It was weird as shit.
Yeah.
But the junction systems was ridiculous, and I always hate it because I'll find a really useful spell. I'll be like, word, all right, I'll take my Firaga and put it on my strength stat. Okay, cool. Now that's a spell that I can never use again. Fuck me. I get into a fight where someone's weak against ice, and every time I use it now, I'm getting less strong. It was ridiculous.
Yeah.
So I hated it, and then probably about 5 years ago, I played through it again and just tried to like experience it for what it was as a totally separate thing. And yes, the story is just ridiculous. The part at where they revealed everything about the orphanage, fucking ridiculous. And the fact that Guardian Forces do what they do. I don't want to ruin anything for anybody listening. But how Guardian Forces play into the story. I liked how in the other games it's just like, oh, it's a summon. Okay, it exists in the world. That's it. In Final Fantasy VIII, they did the whole Star Wars and Metachlorians thing, where they tried to explain it and put it into the world, and you're just like, boom, I don't care. They come out when you call them. I don't give a shit about anything.
Talking about the Midichlorians, which came first then? Final Fantasy VIII or Parasite Eve was first, right?
Yeah.
Because that was its whole story, was the Midichlorians were...
Right, it was on the demo, yeah.
Yeah. The Midichlorians were corrupting people and they were turning into...
No, it wasn't Midichlorians, it was mitochondria.
Same shit.
Same MacGuffin.
God,
yeah, seriously.
Can we talk about how incredible Parasite Eve is and gets no...
Yes,
I
please.
would love to talk about the battle system. For the record, my favorite thing about Parasite Eve, before we get into it, is I'm a big fan of Supergiant Games. They've put out Bastion and they put out Transistor. That's their two games they put out. Love both of them. But I was just laughing when people were like, have you seen the battle system in Transistor? It's fucking mind-blowing, man. And I'm like, have you never played Parasite Eve? Because it's the same fucking game, dude. Like... Yeah. Oh man, but yeah, fantastic game. Oh my god.
It also sounds like I should play Transistor if it's plays like Parasite Eve.
Oh, Transistor's amazing. It's really short, but it's really sweet. It's really
much like
I like short.
Eve.
Short is to my taste. I do not want to devote hundreds of hours into another RPG when I have so many on my plate.
That's why I didn't play Xenoblade Chronicles X for the Wii U, because I heard it was like 100+ hours just for the main game and was like, I'm good. I was like, I have a life, I have a job, like...
I have YouTube.
Yeah,
that's what we were talking about before. It's hard to do that. When I get home from work, I got to go to the gym, and then when I get back from the gym, I'm like, okay, I could play a video game. But at this point, it's late at night, I'm already worn out, and then I sit down to an RPG, and it's like sitting down to a book. You're going to fall asleep immediately. So I'll be playing, like I'm playing through a PS2 tactical RPG right now, and every fight I save and go to sleep right after every fight. I mean, they're like 30-minute, 40-minute fights, but still, I just don't have the time, and it's terrible because that's my favorite genre. So it's between that and then like whatever I have on Steam, and everything I have on Steam is like quick fixes, little bullet hells or Mega Man clones or something like that. I can't play my favorite genre anymore. It's terrible.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons.
When you were able to play, was it Type 0?
I played Type 0, and I recently started up Resonance of Fate on the PS3, and I have 40 hours in that, and that's the last game that I like put a lot of time into.
How is that? Pretty good?
Oh, it's insane. Oh my god, it is so underrated. It's crazy. It is a really, really cool game.
It's Sega, right?
Sega and what's their name? This is gonna kill me. They're right.
I think some of the characters are in Project X Zone 2, which I've been playing. That's like my weekend, morning, and evening go-to game to sit down and play through. And just like you said, it's like easy. 30 to 40 minutes for a level, and then save.
Yeah, strategy RPGs are so easy to just pick up. I have Final Fantasy Tactics on the Vita, and it's so easy to get into a fight, level some characters, and put it down. Like, I love that. It's so good.
Yeah, and I'm not a tactical strategy RPG guy at all. But just, I don't know what it was. I think it was the music, in all honesty, because I heard the tracks beforehand when I was picking tracks for Pixel Tunes. And I was like, this music is amazing. All the tracks are great. I was like, I saw the first game in stores and was like, oh, but it's tactical, it's strategy. I was like, I'm not interested. So I picked up the second one and fell in love with it. It's a great game.
If you want a really solid tactical RPG that's very short, if you haven't played it already, you have to play Vandal Hearts.
I've heard that's good. Yeah.
It's only about 10 hours, but it is a really, really good game.
10 hours is a good small chunk of time RPGs,
It might be as much as 15, but I remember it was not very long at all.
Yeah.
I had a viewer on my channel actually send that to me. He was downgrading his PS1 collection, and he sent me some killer game, Vandal Hearts and Tactics Ogre.
Oh wow!
And some killer.
Nice.
Yeah, he sent me some really cool stuff. What's that Sega CD
Yes.
game? Vi.
Oh.
Vi?
V-A, yeah, Vi.
Yeah, Vi.
He sent me a
yeah,
complete copy of that, which is insane. That's a Working Designs game, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that dude. And I asked him, I was like, listen, I can pay for shipping something. This is a lot of stuff you're giving me. He said, no, I don't want to sell it because like that's, I collected it because I love them and I feel like you'll play them. So I was like, all right, well, absolutely, that's a fair trade.
Yeah.
Jimmy
Super nice
Hoppa
guy.
reminds me of a very good point for Vandal Hearts in the chat. Is every time, it might be when you do criticals, or maybe it's when you kill the characters. I don't remember, but blood like gushes out of their sprites in this big fountain that
cool.
sprays up in the air.
Oh,
And
hell
somehow
yeah.
that is extremely satisfying.
They had cool. You know what I like is when in early like 32-bit games when they had a lot of sprite scaling. So just like in Vandal Hearts, when you get a critical or when an archer fires an arrow and the arrow kind of scales into the screen and gets bigger.
Yes,
and they did
there's a lot of that. And
they did such a bad job of doing it, but it's so cool. It's just you know what I mean? Like it doesn't look believable, but it looks cool, kind of like that.
Yeah.
Like, that's what I like about early PS1 games is the sprite-based games and how cool the scaling was.
Well,
and
you sure will love Vandal Hearts then, if that's your thing.
Yeah, I like Vandal Hearts. This is a cool game. There's not a lot of tactical RPGs on console, pre-Xbox 360 that I haven't played or you know what I mean? Like, I get into that genre specifically a lot.
Yeah.
Out of curiosity, talking about tactical RPGs, am I the only person in here who's played Pokemon Conquest? And I will be perfectly understandable if that's the case. That would not be the first
I've
time
never
that's
even
happened.
heard of that. Conquest.
Okay, so
I think that was all you.
Pokemon Conquest is this game that came out for the DS, I want to say 3 or 4 years ago, right? And the whole concept is like it's some big region, right? And that it's all these like feudal Japanese like families that like control the regions, but it's a tactical RPG where instead of like characters, right, it's the Pokemon they summon. But it still is the same shit. It still is like family lines and like all these things, elemental types,
That
and
sounds
it's
cool as
still
hell.
like a 120-hour game because you have to conquer all the regions and then you can replay the story as a different region and like conquer it through that way. But
Gotta conquer them all.
It's sick though.
Conquer
It's like
them
a
all. Oh
really
my God.
in-depth tactical RPG because like you
Wait,
might
this
see
was released in
folks-
America?
Yeah, it's on the DS, dude, and it's amazing. It's
How
super
have I not
good.
heard of this?
I
This sounds
swear to God,
awesome.
it's
Is this
awesome.
a Koei crossover?
I would have to take a look at it, but it's weird, man. I'll grab the box here in a second when I get a chance, but it's amazing because like the different spells have different like hitboxes and radiuses and things, and like the Pokemon powers might give them like different effects in battle. Like it feels like a full-fledged tactical RPG,
That sounds
and it
awesome.
just
I'm not gonna lie.
swallows your soul.
Yeah, you've sold me.
Yeah, it's great. I highly, highly recommend it if you haven't checked it out. I'm really into genre-bending games that do it well, and it was one of those things where it was like, a tactical Pokemon game, yeah, whatever, and then I played it, and I'm like, this is one of the best things I've ever played. Are you kidding me? Like,
It is a Koei game, actually. I just looked it up.
Huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, it looks
That
like
sounds cool.
Jimmy says it too.
That makes sense.
I imagine it's probably pretty cheap. I don't know fucking anybody who picked it up.
Yeah,
And
that
Pokemon
I
games
sounds
love,
right up
I
my
gotta
alley.
admit, I love a good Koei game, so.
Pokemon games tend to run pretty high, though. I mean, no matter what, they usually, because
But
they're
not
Nintendo games, they usually
like
run
at the
high.
mystery dungeon games like cheap. Like
Yeah, that's
I
true.
like
Those
to think
ones look
Pokemon
cool.
when they're not normal, those do look cool. That they're people don't go so crazy for them. It's really just the
Yeah,
main series.
That makes sense.
I don't
And for
know.
some reason, the GameCube game like never got expensive, which blows my mind because it's a normal role playing game, but Pokemon.
Coliseum?
XD?
Coliseum?
No, the not Coliseum.
Conquest or whatever? Isn't it Conquest?
No,
talking
Conquest.
about
No,
one
Conquest
you
is
were
the
just
one I was just talking about. No, I picked it up in Portland last year. I remember because they.
The name of
they
it,
had
I know, it's
cheap-
Pokemon RPG. I don't know.
Isn't it XD?
Yes, it's.
I think it is
Oh,
XD.
XD,
yeah,
yeah,
I remember
It's got, like,
that.
yeah, I'm picturing the cover.
Like
It's got the
something
silver color and
darkness?
like the blue
Yeah.
coat and all that
Darkness.
jazz.
Yeah, I've recently, speaking of the mystery dungeon, the Pokemon, was it Rescuers or whatever? It's kind of like a mystery dungeon style game. I've been recently getting into that style of like that mystery dungeon crawler kind of style. I played Chocobo's Dungeon 2, I think it was.
Chocobo's Dungeon
Yeah.
is awesome. Oh,
It's killer.
man.
It's
Have
great.
you
I never
played,
got into that style of game before.
Have you played Azure Dreams?
I have, yeah.
That's
I
the
finally-
I
I
finally
think that
get-
one's probably my favorite.
Jared,
That
you
Remember
and,
the Game Boy
actually.
Color, too.
Right?
Yeah, there was a Game Boy Color port or
Yeah.
remake. I guess demake.
Some D-Make. It's gotta be a
Demake.
D-Make.
I played Azure Dreams after I started getting into the genre. What else do I have on Dreamcast? Time Stalkers is a similar style game.
I played that way back in the day.
Especially if you appreciate a good strategy RPG for the crossovers.
Yeah.
So
it's an interesting game, but I've been getting more and more into that series. I'm trying to look up like newer, more modern games. There's one. Oh God, there's one on the Vita right now called like Super Curry Princess or Curry or something like that.
Yeah.
What is that kind of stuff?
It was like sorcery something.
Something about curry. I remember that.
Yeah.
But yeah, that looks pretty cool. And there's another one called Dragonfin Soup that kind of looks.
Another awesome one, if you have a PSP, is ZHP.
Oh yeah, this is a Hero Project, whatever from.
The Dark Death Evil Man versus whatever. That one is hilarious. It's a NIS game, and it's just funny.
I had a friend that said it was really good, and this was before I got into the genre, so I kind of dismissed it. And I have a copy of it on the PSP. I should probably.
It is. It's funny. I guess the premise is you are no, you're not a superhero. The game opens up with a superhero, and it's the end of the world, and he's going to go defeat the Lord of Evil or whatever, and he's got to go fight him. And two like drunk teenagers hit him with a car and kill him. And as he's dying, he picks some random guy off the street who is you, and he's like, "You have to go fight this battle for me. Just put on my suit, no one will know."
Such a Nippon Ichi game. Such a Nippon Ichi game.
And you get your ass kicked, and the world ends. And you have to go, like, they reverse time somehow. And now the actual game is you're going through like superhero school in the underworld, and you have to train, and so you have to refight the battle, I guess.
It's such a Nippon Ichi game. My friend was playing it, and he like equipped tank treads as like a bottom part of his armor or something like that. It's so ridiculous.
Vandal Hearts, you said, was the name of that other game? The one with the blood?
Yeah, on the PS1.
Yeah.
Wow. It's still pretty cheap.
Yeah. It's cheap.
There's a sequel, too.
The sequel is a little strange because both the way the battle is set up, it's like you choose where you're going to go and the enemy chooses where they're going to go on the map, and you move simultaneously. So half the time they move out of the way of where you were going to hit them. So it's hard to play. But it still has that cool art style, and the story is still really good. So
right
now, cheap for me is a relative term, and I know some of these guys already know my
22
view on buying games.
Oh, this is a great speech.
22 is actually expensive for me because I have never in my entire life paid more than $20 for a game that wasn't a modern release ever.
Oh wow!
Never done it before. And I have my RPG collection on the PS1 is like in the 90 percentile complete range, somewhere in that neighborhood. I have almost every PS1 RPG because that's where I cut my teeth, and I want to have all of them because I grew up I didn't have any money when I grew up.
I think the most I spent on a PS1 RPG was I spent $35 on Tales of Destiny 2. And that was just because it was hard to find. Spent. That one was hard to find, and when I found an FYE of all places. And they don't come. They like at the time they did not come down on their prices. And I had in my hand, I had a choice. It was Tales of Destiny 2 or Tale Concerto, and I was like, well, this one's an RPG and this one isn't. And in hindsight, I should have bought both. However,
yeah, for sure. Yeah, but I have a very weird view on game collecting. I don't, and if I do spend more than $20, it has to be on a lot, and in that lot, the total price can't equal more than $20 each game. Or else the whole system breaks down.
You are my kind of collector, sir. I approve of your.
I am frugal as all. Yes. And you know what? Somehow I have gotten some really expensive games out of it just by like being frugal and waiting and not making snap judgments. You know, I go to my local game store, and if I pick up a game that's like $25, the guy behind the counter, he knows. He's like, all right, $20, Jesus Christ, because he knows I'm not buying either way, and he's a super nice guy. Yeah, but if I'm online, I just look for lots for like a $60 lot with like 9 games in it, and then I'll sell what I don't need, and then I got a game for like $12, and I'm good.
I remember when I was actively collecting my PS1 games, and Final Fantasy VII was everywhere. Like $15 was about what the game was, and you could buy it at any store. They had 1 million copies. And then fucking Advent Children came out, and the game shot up to $60. And I was like, fuck no, I don't own it yet, but I am not paying more than $15.
Right.
And I was using Game TZ a lot at the time. And I finally found somebody who... Game Traders.
Really? I never heard of that.
Huh. It's been around forever, but it's... I found a guy who I guess didn't know the game had arisen, and he was like $12. I'm like, yep, there you go. That's my copy.
You know what? You bring up an interesting point. Let's talk about this, because this is a good topic of conversation. Final Fantasy Advent Children, I enjoyed as a movie. A really cool movie, especially the Bahamut fight scene. Super cool. Absolutely ruined Squaresoft games from Advent Children on. I think you could,
like, graphically.
Yeah, I think
not graphically. I'm talking gameplay, mechanically. You could take every bad SquareSoft RPG from then on and trace it right back to like Final Fantasy Advent Children. I think that's what
I would agree. Except, and Lord knows I've gotten in near fistfights with Dubious over it. I to this day maintain that I genuinely, to a really extreme degree, enjoy Final Fantasy 12. We could get into that.
12 is really good.
I had a conversation with Derek about that earlier.
Yeah. 12 is a cool game. Yeah. It's a departure. I don't count it as like a mainline Final Fantasy for some reason. It just doesn't feel right to me. But 12 is a good game. It definitely wasn't a bad game for sure.
Well, here's the thing. Earlier, well, go ahead, I was saying earlier that when Final Fantasy 12 came out, pretty much everyone loved it. It was different, but it was still a good game, and everyone liked the kind of new take on the battle system. And then it was only after Square never really went back to traditional games that everyone was like, no, fuck that game. You know, that's when the hate started to pile on. Mm-hmm. So, what you were going to say, Don?
Okay, see, I can see people's arguments with the game in that the main character is fucking abysmal. But here's my entire argument for why Final Fantasy 12 is a good game. Mechanically, I think it's fun. I like the battle system. It's active. It's whatever. If you don't like it, it's a taste thing. That's fine. Fuck it. Mm-hmm. Scrap that point. It's invalid. But the thing about the story and the characters is that entire game, for the vast majority of its development, was based around the concept of Balthier being the main character. And, like, as far as that game is concerned, Balthier's the shit. He's like an action-adventuring sky pirate who fights judges and robs shit. Like, Balthier's awesome. If they would have just dropped everything with Vaughn or whatever his name was, if they would have just, cut Gact out of a Final Fantasy for the first time in like 15 years, it would have been an amazing game. But they're like, well, we have no way to market a fucking love story in this. This isn't going to appeal to a mainstream audience. Rewrite the story, add an appealable character. And it killed it. Because if you literally cut anything dealing with that character and like the weird love triangles, if you cut all that shit out, Final Fantasy 12 is amazing. The bosses are amazing. The art style is amazing. I love the world. Like, just judges. I'm so into that shit. Like, I love Final Fantasy 12. I have a statue of Balthier on my desk.
See,
and I think it's really like 12. Criminally underrated.
I'm right there with you. I do think it gets a lot of hate that it might not deserve, but Final Fantasy 12 ruined Final Fantasy Tactics. I don't know why. For some reason, the Final Fantasy XII world bled into Tactics, but then you had judges in Tactics who were limiting item use, magic in every fight. Like,
so you didn't like Tactic Advance?
I did like it, and that's the thing. I like Tactics Advance, and I even liked way more the DS, the sequel on the DS. I thought that was a really cool game, but they weren't Final Fantasy Tactics. That was a totally different beast.
Okay.
Like your Tactics Ogre inspired Final Fantasy Tactics. If they would have released a sequel to that, they could have printed money. But Final Fantasy Tactics Advanced was Final Fantasy 12 with a tactical fighting engine. I don't know. It's weird. I don't like the races in Tactics Advanced. They just don't feel right in that kind of like that environment. I don't know why. I don't like that world as much as I like Final Fantasy Tactics. That was like a real like weird Renaissance era / medieval kind of story. And then you had Final Fantasy 12 where it's like, oh, the super fantasy stuff. And, it was like a Tolkien like story. I don't like a lot of.
I feel like Tactics was never really Square's baby. It was just like quests. Not. They took Quest's engine and was like, here, we're going to call it Final Fantasy. They acquired Quest or however that went down. And it's just like, okay, we'll put out one of your games. And like they do with every other kind of product they're not sure about, they just give it a Final Fantasy title so it'll sell.
Yeah.
You know, but it's pretty much Final Fantasy Tactics is the last, Ogre's game.
I wanted to play 12 for a while, but I remember when it came out, my big issue with it, and this is going to sound really anal, but all the graphics and the characters and the art and color styles looked really washed out. Like everything looked.
It is. It's like a gray earth tone palette. I can.
It's
see
like
that
very faded and very natural looking, really and I was so used to the cheery bright skies and the the dark evil areas of like the industrial areas of like 7 and so 7 and 8, like the graphical style I really liked, and then 9 I just couldn't get behind the whole chibi characters, and 10 I was kind of back on board. And then I didn't play 11 at all. And then 12, I was like, well, the characters look kind of cool, but why do they look like
there was an era of Square character art on the PS1 that was all watercolor style. And you saw it with, as Wes pointed out, you saw it with Vagrant Story. And you saw it with The Legend of Mana and the Saga Frontier 2, which is the hands down most gorgeous game on the PS1, by the way.
It's a really good looking game.
It is. It's a terrible game, but it's beautiful.
I wouldn't say terrible, but it's definitely not good. That's for sure. But I love it, even though it's terrible. There are a lot of terrible games that I really like. And I'll admit it right off the bat. Terrible game. But there's something about certain games that I just love. Plus the music in Saga 2 was great.
Getting back to Final Fantasy 12, I have a differing opinion.
Ooh, lay it on me, Derek. I want to hear it. Your opinions are always so well worded.
Tell us the story, Derek.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so you know how in Final Fantasy 12 the gameplay is basically you only control your own main character. Everybody else you just kind of equip gambits to, right?
Yeah.
And the more you play the game, the more gambits you get, which basically allow you to set up predetermined rules that that kick off in certain circumstances. So like if your hit points are under this much, do this action. And as I was playing through Final Fantasy XII, it occurred to me that the goal of Final Fantasy XII is to stop playing Final Fantasy XII and let it play itself.
Okay, you know what? That's a really.
The game was awful. I hated it. The last passable.
You saved it
Final
best for last.
You kind of ran around the circle, gathered all the enemies, and walked away.
Exactly. The last passable Final Fantasy game was Final Fantasy X-2, and that was a stretch.
God!
So,
you just said
so
12, but 10-2 is passable. Who the fuck are you, Matt?
Listen to me.
Jesus.
10-2.
My name is Derek.
One of the better fighting engines. Period on the PS2. That was a killer fighting engine. Yes, the J-pop storyline is god awful, but playing it just to grind was fun.
Exactly.
I'll come out and say it.
The costume system was also pretty cool.
Unlock the costumes and stuff. Yeah, I mean, it looked kind of cool, but the whole J-pop thing, I was like,
I can understand that.
Yeah.
I really can. But it was the first PS2 game, especially the first Final Fantasy game in years where there was a job system. It was just renamed as the Dress Spheres, but it was a job system, and it was a job system that like encouraged switching out jobs during the fight. And then the hectic, if you keep it on active time, I think you can actually choose wait. But if you keep it on active time, you're switching out of menus on the controller. And then once you get like a real memorized layout of all the menus and stuff like that, you'll realize when you're playing it, you're just like the entire time. You're just clicking through menus and changing jobs and then starting like the gunners, that one move where you keep having to hit R1 to fire out more shots and stuff like that. And then straight out of that, you're back into a menu. It's super hectic. I like it a lot.
I'm not sure I'm excited to play the dress-up game. I don't know.
See, I'll give you that. Yeah, even though it's worded stupidly, the whole dress sphere thing, I'll give you that's cool. I'm into job systems. I'm into that, and the MMO I'm playing right now, the entire reason I'm playing it is because it has a job system like that. But it's funny that Mike Tendo mentions that he couldn't get into Final Fantasy IX because it looked like a bunch of children. I couldn't get into 10-2 because it was fucking J-pop simulator. And like it was one of those things where I have really mixed opinions on Final Fantasy X too, because there are things that I really enjoy out of Final Fantasy X, and then there are things that give me 10, 2.
Final Fantasy X.
The reason that I said Final Fantasy X-2 is passable though is honestly mostly just to spite Final Fantasy 12, because fuck it.
I see.
That's kind of funny.
All right.
I had a hard time getting into Kingdom Hearts because it spent so much time focusing on fucking Final Fantasy X.
Oh, fuck.
It's like,
Kingdom
I came
Hearts.
for my Disney characters. What the fuck is with all this Titus shit?
Yeah, Kingdom Hearts was for the teenagers that were coming around. Around the time of Final Fantasy X, you had a bunch of teenagers coming up who had not played RPGs, and then they played Kingdom Hearts. And that's the same, I think it's the same group, and I'm going to offend a couple of people here. I think, to me, Kingdom Hearts fans are to RPGs as Zelda fans are to video games. The basic bitch of video games, pretty much.
I like Zelda. What's your opinion? I was with you all the way up.
I think he's saying self-proclaimed, like they identify as
right. Yeah.
I'm a Zelda
here's
fan.
the thing.
Fuck you! I'm both of those groups.
I don't know. Kingdom Hearts did not give me enough Donald Duck role playing.
Everybody needs
That's all I wanted.
Sometimes.
Give me DuckTales the RPG. That's what I want. Story. That would be my perfect Disney game.
I like the idea. I like making Disney characters in a serious Final Fantasy world. Had the story have even come to anything or like made any kind of, I don't know, progress throughout the game. At the end of the game, you know as much as at the beginning of the game.
Yeah.
It's terrible. Oh, God.
I hated the controls. Hated them.
Controls are terrible.
I hated playing with whatever the fuck the main character's name is.
Sora.
I remember being on like palm trees and trying to jump from palm tree to palm tree, and I just kept falling off the palm tree. I was like, nope, I'm done.
Yeah. No. You know what? I bought the HD ports because my wife was a real big fan of Kingdom Hearts back in the day, and she's like, oh, I can't wait. So I bought her the HD ports, and we played through it, and we got to that same part where you're racing the other guy, Riku, right. And we got to it, and we're like, wow, so this is garbage, huh? That's crazy. Like, you just never, you didn't know it.
I'm going to play devil's advocate because fuck all you twogs. Here's my argument for why Kingdom Hearts are not terrible. The story is god-awful. I will give you that point. And I will also admit that point carries extra weight when we're talking about RPGs, is that's technically what they're supposed to be, you know. That's their selling point. That's the whole fucking
like action
RPG.
This is an action RPG.
Yeah, okay.
But yeah, that's true.
Point being, platforming sections aside, I absolutely love how that game plays because it's got RPG elements. You have to hit specific like parts on bosses. It's got hidden boss fights. It's got hidden zones, hidden equipment. Like it's got all the shit I love in an RPG. Just with terrible.
It also has terrible camera controls, though.
Yeah,
at least the original. No. At least the original was
the original.
Yeah.
That was my biggest problem. If I can't have fun within 5 minutes of sitting down, playing the game with a controller, I'm done.
Now, see, I'm the absolute opposite. I'm in for a slow burn. If you can't get a game going, I'll give you some time. But
it depends. Like the new Star Fox, I know I'm going to need some time to sit down and get used to the controls on that.
Don't get me started on
that. If I'm writing a review, I will give a game a fair, like I'll sit down and play through the whole game. And there are some games that I had previously been like, fuck this game, that since I've started reviewing, I'm like, oh my God, this game's good. So I can see the argument for the slow burn. However, as a player, if you can't catch my attention in an hour, or maybe even 2 hours, I'll give you the time of a movie. If you can't make it interesting, I'm out. Fuck it.
It depends on the game too. If it's an action game, then 5 minutes. I need to know how to play it in 5 minutes. Like Kingdom Hearts.
I get that.
RPGs.
Jimmy in the chat.
I get it.
Jimmy in the chat just mentioned something that I really did actually enjoy in Kingdom Hearts 1, and I was super pissed when they removed it from 2. The ship building, what was it, Gummy or Gummy?
Oh, the Gummy ship.
Gummy.
Yeah, the Gummy.
Gummy, really? You've never seen Gummy Bears?
Oh, I know what Gummy Bears are, but it's...
Gummy ship, Gummy Bears, Disney.
They're bouncing here and there and everywhere.
I did not
High Magic, that's beyond compare?
Yeah.
Is that what that's all about?
Got that.
Yeah.
Really? I didn't know that the Gummy Bears was a Disney IP.
I haven't even played past the Donald section in Kingdom Hearts, and I know that.
Okay, cool.
I did not know that.
Anyways, that was actually a really fun shooting spaceship building game.
The ship was cool. Playing with a ship I did not like. But I will say this. Even though I do not like Kingdom Hearts, I can say they set up a really interesting story right off the bat once you get through with the tutorial, which is terrible, but right when you're on the island and things started going to shit, that really had me interested. Okay, what's going on with this world? And then you get to the end of the game and you're like, oh, okay, so what's happening with this world again? Because you have explained literally nothing. Oh, there's a guy now. Oh, okay, game's over, finished. Like it was ridiculous. But that first setup, it had me into it, and I actually played through the game. And that was one of the first games that I played through the end of it, and then went, wow, that was terrible at the end of the game. Which is just, if I don't like it, I'll stop playing. But Kingdom Hearts gets progressively worse as you beat it, which should be impossible.
I say that it gets progressively
singing
worse.
the gummy bear song in chat.
Oh God, no. But no, see, I will admit that Kingdom Hearts as a franchise gets worse the longer it goes on. Some of the Game Boy games are pretty good, and I enjoy them a lot. But I just really... I'm not one of those people who is completely hooked on the idea of a turn-based combat system in RPGs. Don't get me wrong, I like turn-based games, love tactics games, but I am not somebody who is like action RPG phobic. And I love the way that Kingdom Hearts plays, because it's the same argument I have for Kirby. Like, the enemy design is creative. It forces you to think about the mechanics in the game. Like, the fights are thematic and big and enjoyable, and you get sucked into them. And that's what I like about the game. Like, yeah, I don't give a fuck about Asmendus and Heartless and save the princess, Sora. I don't care about any of that shit. Yeah. But I care about going out into the desert in the Aladdin world and fighting a secret boss that's going to butt rape me for 4 hours. You know what I mean? Like, I'm into that aspect of the game. And I feel like the game...
Period.
Yeah, the sex aspect?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this is no surprise to anybody who's familiar with it.
No. You just reaffirmed everybody's suspicions.
Yeah, confirmed.
I like action RPGs. I'm not saying that. I just think that Kingdom Hearts didn't do it right, whereas there's games like Ys, Zelda, those types of games, those are action RPGs. Those,
especially the later Ys games. That shows you how to make...
I just started Oath and Felghana, and it is fantastic.
That's how you do an action RPG right there. Fast, just frantic combat, but I mean, it's still tactical in a way. The RPG elements are still there. Yeah, I think the E series, if you would have had like a solid, like fixed camera Kingdom Hearts game with like an Ys fighting engine, forget about it. That would be a fucking...
I would have played that.
That'd be fun.
It sounds
I would have played the hell out of that game.
Yeah, what the hell? What did we start talking about before we hit the Kingdom Hearts? We are on tangents.
Final Fantasy 12.
I don't know. I hijacked this one.
That's right. You know what? Let's get back on my track, because that is all that matters. Advent Children. Advent Children is directly to blame for Final Fantasy 13. Directly to blame. You take one part of Final Fantasy 13's fighting engine and don't tell me that's not a fucking scene from Advent Children. That's what I think. Because Advent Children got so popular, and it's awesome. I love Advent Children, even with all of its problems. It made Cloud even more sulky and bullshitty than he was in the games. But it's a killer movie. Man, that scene where they're fighting Bahamut and everybody's helping, throwing them up into that. Man, I get goosebumps just watching it. But that's not how RPGs should play. Or Squaresoft hasn't figured out how to make RPGs play that way. And I think ever since then, Final Fantasy 13, every game they put out so far, because Final Fantasy Advent Children, it was huge. It was a huge hit. So now they're thinking to themselves, this is what the people want. And that's not what they want. I think
that's a fair assessment, because Square Enix knows what they're doing. They just... It's like and you know what else happened around the same time? I'm not sure what's happening to your head, but okay.
I'm trying
to... They did the merger. They did the Square and the Enix merger. And I think what really happened was they're like, okay, well, we're going to have our traditional RPG series. We can't have two. And they focused on Dragon Quest is going to be the face of traditional RPGs for the company. And they have turned Final Fantasy into kind of the fun system to catch all the kids. Yeah. They've turned into something that is really flashy with graphics and...
Which would make sense if they didn't already have a following that were willing to buy a classic. No, I'm not against. I'm not saying
they made a smart marketing decision.
Oh no, not yet. I see what you're saying. I can see that, but I think the lining up of like the action in Final Fantasy 13 and just how like if you overlaid like a scene from Advent Children on top of a battle from 13, you have about as much interaction and about the same looking, thing. I don't know, man. I can see where you're coming from, and that makes sense. But I don't think Squaresoft would shoot themselves in the foot just to like save one series versus another. But I guess in Japan, Dragon Quest probably sells more than Final Fantasy VII.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
If they were smart, they would have just revived the Mana series, because that's been pretty dormant since what? I guess that they did just remake Mana Adventure or something. What is that called?
Oh, the Sword of
Mana?
The mobile one?
Yeah, they keep remaking Sword of Mana. Like, they can't get enough of that shit.
Everybody hated that.
I think another one of the problems is Final Fantasy is so popular in the U.S., and I think Square Enix has a very kind of almost racist view of what Americans like.
Yeah.
So I think
I wouldn't say racist. I would say just ill-informed. They think we all like the Madden games and Call of Duty, and I think maybe they're like, oh, that's what they like. We'll give them that. The only problem is they're not getting any of the feedback because none of the executives up at Square Enix are listening to what anybody's saying on YouTube. So everybody hates new Final Fantasy, and they're like, oh, it's perfect. Everything's going great. I think everything's fine from this chair.
That's interesting that you bring up Square Enix listening to fans, because I'm really interested in seeing what they're going to do with all the Final Fantasy VII Remake moments that are today too risque.
You're talking about cross-dressing Cloud.
I'm talking about cross-dressing
Cloud, the Honeybee Inn,
Tifa's breasts, like
the prostitution within.
I don't think there's a problem with Tifa's breasts. We have lots of breasty games.
I guarantee
Big
you,
boobs have.
Square Enix is gonna drop her bust size.
Oh, for sure, they will. I guarantee you. Yeah.
Absolutely, and they already did it with that.
I can't wait. I do not want to see all of the clickbaity news articles that are talking about the outrage her boobs are smaller.
Well, they already started. There are already articles and YouTube videos with people complaining about the fact that both sides, the fact that they're gonna drop Tifa's breast size and the fact that they need to drop it. And somebody wrote some article on like Mary Sue or something like that, and they were totally like pulling everyone's chain. Like apparently it was a male writer that was posing as a female writer or something like that.
Oh, that's right. I remember that.
You guys remember that? And he wrote some huge article about Final Fantasy VII and like Tifa and like all this other stuff, and it was really like ham-fisted, kind of like like this is an absolutely ridiculous theory. And all the feminists ate it up, and they were like, "That's a great theory. That's fantastic. They need to do that." And it's gonna happen. And
it will.
I'm gonna get so mad when they do that, when they drop her down. Like I personally, I'm of the mindset, don't change what you already have. Like they already changed it for Advent Children. They changed her costume. They changed Cloud's.
I'm of the opinion that her boobs really don't. I don't give a shit.
Right, who cares?
I really don't give a shit what size her breasts are when the game comes out.
About Tifa's boobs. How dare you?
I realize I have my own breasts, so my opinion is completely invalidated here, but I really don't give a shit.
Now, this may be relevant. I actually have some decent-sized boobs. Donovan can attest to this. He knows.
They stare different directions, too.
They do. Nipples going this way. It's good. But here's the thing. Tifa's breasts being a different size in the game, not important as a subject, I don't think. Right. Why Tifa's breasts would be a different size in the release of the game, that's what's important. Why they're doing it.
Oh.
Right.
You know what I mean? That to me is the issue. They're placating to a group that don't play Final Fantasy games. And that's the fact of the matter is. If you're out there complaining about the size of somebody's breast on the internet, there's a good chance you did. Go ahead.
You can't say.
I think what you're going to find is also now you've got this character model designer or whatever is going to make, and she looks fine, she looks great, and someone's going to go, but her boobs are a different size. You did it because of this, and it's like, no, dude, it's in proportion. It looks good.
Right. There's going to be shitbags on each side because even on the side that I'm on, which is you should leave the character design as it is. I can still at the same time, if you're bringing the character into a 3D world and a fully realized 3D woman, having a slender size I wouldn't be against completely, but I am against kind of placating to the crowd because this is the reality of the issue, is that the kind of crowd that complains about breast size in video games aren't buying video games.
Right.
So when they make this change, the only people who are going to deal with the change are going to be people like me who buy video games and don't care about, it's a big-breasted woman. Okay, she was also one of the most interesting characters in the game, and happened to have big breasts. It's not unrealistic for women to have big breasts. Exactly. I've met women with big breasts. They're out there. I've seen them.
I would expect her character to look like sort of a square version of Lara Croft. Like that's what I kind of expect Tifa to look like.
I would like to see her more muscular. I'm into fitness myself, and a lot of times you have these girls like Tifa in the original Final Fantasy VII was this skinny.
Yeah,
you know what
it
I mean?
makes
I would
more
like to
sense for
see
her
that.
to be bulked up, a little bit more muscular.
Buxom.
I agree.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
I would expect to see muscles
What
on her.
aside, you know what? Honestly, and I argued about it a lot for something, but I'm not super into the fact that because they will change Tifa's breast size. I've moved on from that. I've kind of gotten over it. But they are going to make other changes too. I mean, they're already talking about, oh, the Honeybee Inn's not going to work.
Right. That's not even going to exist, probably. I mean, really.
I want to see Cloud in his hot tub with the manly bears. As
Yeah,
long as they keep that scene, that's what I want.
That's the scene that they're talking about. It's not the prostitution. It's the gay guys.
Don't take away my manly bears. That was hilarious. They need to keep that.
You know what? Here's the crazy thing is I played that game a lot and I've never actually gotten into the Honeybee Inn. I've only seen it on YouTube, so that's kind of I've never actually
really?
because
I did it, but I had the strategy guide when I was a kid.
Yeah. I've never used the strategy guide on that game except for when I got to some of the weapon fights.
I don't think I've heard of this, actually. Could you, for people who haven't gotten to the Honeybee or seen videos, could you elaborate on what this is?
In Wall Market, there is the Honeybee Inn, which is like everybody talks about it, and you can't even get to the area where you're gonna like get inside because there's a bouncer who's like, no, you have to have this card that lets you get in. And the Honeybee Inn is this place where you can go just to bang chicks, dudes. It's a burlesque. Yeah, it's a brothel, and it caters to everybody. There's gay dudes there, straight women, this, that, and the other. And
old people,
everybody loves it. I mean, everybody talks about it like, holy shit, I can't save up enough money. It's this place that everybody aspires to, and there's a lot of poor people in Wall Market who just can't get in like you. And you have to go through this really absurd, like, random events, and you have to like find these different items and trade it between people, and then finally you get your card to go in there. Cloud goes into the Honeybee Inn, and there's a certain room that you can go into where like 6 or 7 big bulky gay dudes oil you up and get you in a tub, pretty much. I mean, the camera pans up and it's tasteful. You know, they're just like, oh, look at this guy, and then
they don't show anything, right?
They don't show anything at all,
right.
And Cloud never. Now Cloud does say like, oh, you know, like. He does resist, but he never once goes like, oh, I'm being raped. You know what I mean? And they don't show him getting anally penetrated, which
I didn't know what was going on because I was
men celebrating each other's strength.
I was in high school when I played it the first time around, and
you didn't know what was going on?
I didn't really know what was going on. I was kind of like,
just a bunch of dudes hanging out, having a good time. I don't get it.
Yeah. I was like, well, they're rubbing him, they're massaging him. Like, what's going on here?
Nice.
I thought it was weird. But I didn't think it was like overtly sexual. I just kind of was like,
no, I got the game for my 14th birthday. I knew exactly what was going on.
I never.
Well, girls develop faster than boys.
Yeah, there you
go.
Yeah. I never caught on to the fact that there were gay dudes hanging around Wall Market. You know what I mean? They were just like unique characters to me at the time. I never thought about it in that way, I guess, which is a testament to how not offensive that part of the game is. But they're going to change that because, you know, outrage culture has gotten to the point, and like I've said a million times, if you're a part of outrage culture, you're not a part of actual gaming. Like, sure, you probably, you know, buy a copy of the latest Call of Duty game to write about it on your blog, but you're not going out there and buying Final Fantasy VII and replaying it to see how misogynist it is. You know what I mean? Like, these people aren't paying for games. So a lot of the changes that are being made in a lot of these games that are coming out, and they're being made for people who aren't buying the games. And then everybody else is stuck with the bill.
But Jared,
that's my only issue with it.
What am I going to tell my 6-year-old daughter about Tifa's breasts? What am I going to tell her?
To work out, and then her breasts will probably get bigger.
Right. No, that was that was the whole thing, and I don't want to get too off topic, but that was the whole thing about that Overwatch. What, Overwatch?
Yeah, on the other.
That's not off topic. Butts are on topic.
On the Guardians, we seriously went into it for like 45 fucking minutes, dude. I could go on and on.
One person.
Buttgate. It's absurd. It's mind fucking blowing. I don't even want to get into that. My big thing on the Honeybee Inn, though, as far as like it being included and not included too, is it had a direct relation with my favorite scene in the game, and that is however you handle the Honeybee Inn relates to who you take on the date when you go to the Gold Saucer. And far and away, my favorite date you can get at the Gold Saucer is when Cloud takes Barrett. And if they take that out of the fucking game,
they're gonna
lose my shit.
And you know what's terrible is
the carousel ride in the world. It's like iconic. It's fucking amazing.
If you're gonna cater like you call it outrage culture, if you're going to cater to people who are looking for inclusive storylines, wouldn't you leave this content, but don't make it a joke? Treat it with seriousness. Treat it with, hey, why can't Cloud prefers men? Why can't, in your instance of the game, you'd make these decisions where he would take Barrett?
So that's going to be the problem, and that's what we're seeing now is take that cartoon Steven Universe that they pulled all the homosexual stuff because they didn't want to offend anybody. So that's exactly what's going to happen. Is it's going to backfire on all these people that want inclusive stories and inclusive tales and inclusive characters. All that stuff is going to be scrapped, and we're going to have white male, white female, black male, black female, and all the races, and no one's going to be anything unique. It's just going to be very bland, very flat characters.
Here, I agree, and here's where I sound like a crazy old man. This is how it starts. Honestly, really and truly, and I look like a crazy. There's gray on my beard, actually.
It's the white beater and the beard and the shaved head. I mean, no matter what comes out of your mouth at this point.
I have a ceramic jug over here with 3 X's on it. I can just pull out real quick. No, this is how it starts, though, because if we're taking ourselves out of the situation. I'm really good at de-investing my emotions into the situation. The Honeybee Inn is a small, not necessary, completely sidetrack part of the game. You don't have to experience that, and not only do you not have to, but it's hard to experience that, and it literally has no bearing on the actual story of the game. So yes, when you think about it that way, they're getting rid of something that's ultimately not important. But that is, once you start saying, okay, all right, fine, you can take that from me, they're going to keep taking from you, because now you're going to have Barrett, and Barrett, the way he cusses a lot, is going to have people think, well, African Americans aren't cultured. No character will be able to express a negative personality trait without.
I totally forgot about that. Yeah, I totally forgot about Barrett swearing and that.
Or like, let's say there's a part where Barrett's on your party and so is Sid, and Sid being a white male yelling at Barrett. Are you kidding me? You know what I mean? Right. This is you have to put yourself in the mindset of somebody who will be offended regardless. If they take away the Honeybee Inn, there's going to be something in the game for them to be offended by. What's that going to be? I did a video on this. Like, let's say Resident Evil 5. Well, it's racist because this white guy killing black people.
That blew my
mind. He's a white guy.
To be fair, it got a little racist when you're literally walking through mud huts, shooting dudes in grass skirts with a shotgun.
Now, if you'll go right now,
that was a little probably culturally insensitive. Like,
I don't think it was culturally insensitive. I feel it was culturally accurate, because there are tribes in Africa who literally live in mud huts and dress. As a matter of fact, they were modeled after an actual African tribe. And you're a white guy in Africa, you'll probably come across an African some part way through the game.
All of Africa isn't like mud hut tribes.
It's not. That's why there's only one part.
The game wasn't all mud hut tribes. There were a lot of cities.
There's only one section, and it was on the mouth of a river.
The game was like,
but that one section was
shitty looking cities.
No,
when the demo came out and you played that one section, that's why everybody
in the town. The demo took place in the shanty town.
In the shanty town.
The mud hut plays the plate where you're actually fighting like zombies.
That's when you were on the boats, right?
Yeah, you were on the boat. You were on the mouth of a river, and then you come across, and then you come to an island. First off, the alligator.
Resident Evil 5 is like the one I've played the most of, because there's multiplayer.
Oh, God. It's so sad to hear.
I really haven't played Resident Evil at all.
I don't blame you. I don't blame you. It's
Silent Hill is my
it's
game.
A masochist thing. I like Silent Hill too. Don't get me started on Silent Hill. Actually, Derek knows. It's hard to shut me up once I get started. But yeah, Resident Evil 5, I think that was the least racist thing ever. And the reason why it was racist, because it was black people and a negative thing were happening to them. So is that what we say now? Is if you're a part of a certain race, can you not have a negative personality trait? Can you not have a racist white guy as a character? Because you know what? There are characters who you want to hate. And, if they're you know what I mean?
I mean, he wasandn't shooting them because he was a racist, though. He was shooting them because they were trying to attack him.
They were crazy and sick. And
I mean, it makes sense. If this plague was let loose in Africa, then these Africans would clearly be infected. As a matter of fact, I think we can all assume that it would be mostly Africans that were affected by this plague in Africa. But the problem is they were Africans being involved in something negative.
Well, that plague then is racist, isn't it?
Exactly, because it was. I mean, look who was infected. Only black people, and then maybe Wesker, but he could control himself. white people have all the control.
Wesker's secretly black.
You can see that now. No, but that's my problem is once you say that and say, all right, fine, maybe that was culturally insensitive. So now can we not have stories that take place in Africa?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because if we do, then there's going to be a character involved, and that character may have a negative trait. And if that character is black and has a negative trait, unacceptable. You know what I mean? That's ridiculous.
Okay, but that's not my argument with the RE5 thing. My whole argument with the RE5 in the specific instance of that one section in Resident Evil 5 is that I feel like it's misplaced for the game. Like, say that game was set in America, right? And the entire game, you're running through slums, gunning down, broke people all the time. That makes sense because of the setting.
Central
but if
Florida
then they were
has
like,
a lot of alligators
you have to
weapons.
You have to go through like a Native American tribe camp where it's all fucking teepees and everyone's drunk and broken. That's how you get to the science lab. I'd be like, that doesn't make sense. It's not necessarily that I feel it's outrageously insensitive. It's that in the context, it just feels fucking stupid. So like, I see where you're coming from. There are tribes in Africa that are like that. I don't think that was.
But that's the interesting thing about Africa is how close tribal like settlements are to big cities. That's how Africa is. Africa has like 9 big cities in it, and the rest is just open prairie with fucking like tribal locations on it. And that kind of makes a lot of sense, especially since he was coming from the mouth of a river onto the shoreline. And yeah, there are going to be mud huts in this area where they can find mud. And yes, there are literally right now tribes in a giant portion of Africa that dress that way, that act that way, that live in these kind of situations. To me, that was actually being true to what Africa is like. Because if the whole game took place in shanty towns and cities and then in like an umbrella laboratory, then I would feel like, okay, well now it would be like a game taking place in America and then be like, okay, we're in LA. All right, let's go to New York. All right, perfect.
Yeah, I feel it's forgivable in a video game sense because there is that tradition of having defined visual levels, And you don't need to make sense 100% with geography when you're like, okay, you need every level to look different, and you're going to take different themes from that culture. I feel that's acceptable.
So let's take a look, and let's be completely honest and take race out of it. Africa's a fucking scary place. It's goddamn insanely horrifying.
It's a tough scene.
It is a very it's rough. I'll go as far as saying it's
yeah, that is all I'm gonna say is that
I feel like we would not be privileged white people in Africa.
No, yeah, I feel like
maybe South Africa we'd be on top of the total South Africa, but
my privilege would truly be checked. It would be in Africa.
My thing is, and this is what you bring up all really good points, but the one thing that I was really interested in seeing is when everything reverses and now people are starting to question the very people that they were insulting. And to give you an example, we talked about this a little earlier prior to the podcast. Tales of Berseria is coming out. And they made a announcement that they made a PR announcement that the main character Velvet will remain unchanged regarding her skimpy costume. Same thing with actually it was the reverse as far as Star Ocean 5 getting back on the RPG track was announced that they were changing stuff and they were removing the scantily clad panties or whatever, the tiny panties that this one character was wearing, this female character, and they were replacing them with essentially granny panties.
She has period underwear. This girl is, she's going through saving the world, and it's just a bad time of the month for her.
Exactly. Or Star Ocean 5 took place in the 60 hours during laundry day.
Yeah, there you go. But the other character...
are you going to stop saving the world to go change your underwear?
The other character, though, who's basically wearing like a giant green and black chessboard for a costume and like a scantily, like super, super tight, jubblies everywhere, she remains unchanged. So that's, I think, my big issue is how are you going to...
sexy character.
Where is the line? How are you going to change one character who's not really that sexy and not change the character who's completely sexy? And two... both games their producers were male. Star Ocean 5's game, they were essentially like, yeah, we're changing it. We're changing it because basically they said they're changing it because of the Western media. And now all the Japanese folk are pissed because of that. and they're like posting online, and they're like, "Don't ruin our game."
Assholes.
Right? They're like, "You're ruining our game." You know, you Puritans, whatever. Now, the interesting twist to Tales of Berseria is the costume designer for Velvet's costume is a female. And she made this costume. It was, was it her choice, or was it like, Namco or the higher producers going, you should make her sexy? Like, nobody knows. But my thing is when do you start blaming the people? When do you start, I guess, passing out equal blame? So if the female designer made a scantily clad female costume, is she just as wrong as the male who created the Star Ocean 5 skimpy costume?
It's clearly internalized misogyny. I mean, that's
exactly
obviously what we're talking about now.
She's clearly a product of living in a patriarchal society.
Obviously.
Right.
This is not a serious discussion.
No.
This is we're the wrong crowd. This is like.
What happened was she didn't check her privilege before she left the door.
Yeah.
And then she ended up making costumes. Now the only problem is the characters wearing those costumes weren't involved in a slut walk while wearing them. Absolutely out of the question. Can't be tolerated, right?
The slut walk was canceled because of they didn't check their privilege.
This is my thing. It's you can't draw this line.
Right. What's okay?
Because here you have on one end, you have a woman has every right as a man, and if she thinks something is sexy and wants to wear that, like, I mean, right now I'm wearing a wife beater, you know what I mean? I'm showing off my skin. Am I?
You're offending me right now. You've been offending me.
To be fair though, Jared, you are a whore, and that's not based on your clothes at all. That's based on the fact that you're a whore. Yeah. That's just fact. That's what you do for fun under bridges.
But you have two opposite ends of this coin. You have one that says women can make the choices they want to make, and if they want to show off how sexy they think, because the fact of the matter is that to men, women are sexy. The female form is sexy, and if women, knowing full well, straight women, if they see that, oh well, men really like my form, they think it's sexy, this is something I like, and that's a choice they want to make, then that's good. And then you have the other side of that coin that says, well, if women dress sexy, they're doing it for men, which is an anti-feminist action. You know what I mean? You have these two separate sides of the coin where I think right in the middle should be where the argument is. And it should be, is she naked? No, put her in the fucking game.
This is what I want to say to kind of.
If she's naked, she can be in the game too. You just got to make sure that the rating reflects that. Come on.
Right. Exactly.
Give it that.
Why can't we have AO games? Seriously, in the age of digital distribution, why can't we just have AO games?
Bring back Leisure Suit Larry.
No one gives a shit what Walmart will carry. They're irrelevant now.
Just import it. That's it. Problem solved.
There you go. Release it in China with English subtitles. We'll get it anyway.
Yeah. Right. But this is the interesting part of the subject, and this is why, because you said American Puritans are affecting Japanese game design, and it's actually happening, and it's true. This isn't at first this sounded like conspiracy theories, and most of the people on the more social justice
I'm not sure I really take Star Ocean's crazy granny panties as evidence that we're changing the whole shape of the industry.
By itself, absolutely not. But then if you take it and you take into account the Dead or Alive debacle, and then other people who
that game was not getting released here anyway. It should have been.
It's a different.
Had you have watched my video,
so that they're not going to release their shitty game that wasn't selling well anyway.
It's a different story, though. It's a totally different situation, though. Because
Dead or Alive, they actually, fiscally speaking, if they're being fiscally responsible, the game has always outsold in America the Japanese market. Always.
That's always been the case with almost every series. Yeah.
By double.
We're talking about Extreme Volleyball.
So Dead or Alive Extreme Volleyball, every entry has outsold in America the Japanese counterpart almost by double. And then if you go through that and you say, okay, well, they're trying to make a fiscal decision here and they want to save money. The responsible business decision would have been that it would have been to release in America and not Japan. If that was going to be the case, they should have produced an American game. If that was going to be the case, they have offices here, they have production lines in here. The reason they didn't do it, and now this came from a low-level employee who made the post about it on Twitter, but this was a guy who interacts with the crowd. This was someone who is getting his information from someone in the company. We have a lot of other topics I don't have off the top of my head that are showing a clear
But they're still releasing the Asian version. That's in English. That is fully playable here. I still see this as a marketing ploy. They create this hype with the media to get people outraged, to make the series relevant again, and then release it in a format that we can still get. But now we want it.
They're using
I really see
to their advantage,
manipulating kind of non-issues into.
I think it's
really taking advantage of an argument that we're having with each other.
And there may be some who are. There may be some who are. But like, let's say if I was Koei Tecmo, was it Koei Tecmo who made Dead or Alive? Anyways, going back to that, if I were going to take advantage of that, I would release in America where the numbers are high. Because let's face it, if you don't have your games in a brick and mortar store right now, the only way you can get it in America is to import it. Because this isn't a digitally distributed game. You have to import it from PlayAsia. You have to import, and the fact of the matter is, if you're giving physical copies, if you're dealing in physical copies, you are not making the numbers off of PlayAsia and having people order and pay import fees than you would in a brick and mortar store. So if they were trying to take advantage of outrage culture, they made all the wrong decisions, and these are people who literally make business decisions for their job.
But
if I can see holes in that,
they don't have to pay for localization. They don't have to pay for English dub. They don't have to pay for any of that stuff.
It was they don't have to do that. That's true. The last couple of Dead or Alive games, I think, didn't have English dubs. Also, the game was localized during production. It's localized now. That's why you can pre-order it. I mean, you can get it from PlayAsia. It was already localized. Mm-hmm. So that's where my issue comes from. Every smart business decision says that they should have released in America. This is a game they already had in English. They already had translated. They still have cover art that's been localized. You know what I mean? You have cover art with English characters on it. So the smart money says release in America. That's where your market is. By double. They didn't do that. Why didn't they do that? Because they thought that it would cause a problem for their company in the future with other titles. They chose a short-term loss for their long-term gain. And they did that for a reason, because, these are good businessmen. That's what they do. If I can see holes in their business ideas, that's not something they were doing on purpose. That Jared can sit on his computer and go, "Oh, that doesn't sound right."
Getting back to everything, as far as the Puritans thing goes, it's interesting because they're not Puritans nowadays. Back in the day, in the 90s and the late 80s, yes.
And now we just call them assholes.
It was right. They were right-wing people that wanted to censor games because it wasn't appropriate for the Bible-bearing, Christian culture.
Fundamentalists is who we're talking about.
Right.
Religious fundamentalists.
Now it's completely reversed. And now the rating system... Left. So, and the only way that we were able to get away from the censorship is by creating a rating system. So the rating system was created. Games got back to just releasing whatever the hell they wanted. And
the good old days.
We're self...
from 96
self-rated
ish, like past the Mortal Kombat hype, to all the way up to probably about 2010, 2011-ish, 2012 maybe.
Towards the end of the PS2 era is when people started giving a shit about what was in their games again.
Exactly. And so you started seeing that transition to what we have now, which is...
Hot coffee mod. Exactly.
Yeah, oh God. Forgot about that.
The hot coffee mod. So now we were getting into that. So my question is, what is going to have to be created to please those people so that we get back to an era where nobody gives a shit about this stuff anymore and just game developers.
Oh, burn over here. He burned him.
Shots fired.
I'm highly offended.
That was male privilege if I've ever fucking heard it.
And I have salt.
And you're white, so fuck you.
Salty.
My ovaries are offended at that shit.
I have a hypothesis about that.
Ovary.
Okay.
I don't think anything's going to have to be created, because I think in the next 6 years, it's going to be this is a group that has moved through other underground cultures, and it's going to keep doing it. And people got pissed at me in my last video because I called them all hipsters. That's what they are. They're modern hipsters, and this is the hip thing to do. This is a bandwagon to jump on. Is there a couple of people out there who are honestly morally outraged by the things they're seeing in these video games? Absolutely. They're out there, and they're a very small minority. And then surrounded by them are people that see this socially minded, outward opinion throwing mindset. that's what's cool, and they're going to keep doing it because that is what's really cool to do.
There was in the 90s and late 80s, I think, a very similar movement actually. I can't remember like what it was called, but you could usually pick them out because they would wear those like beatnik kind of hats and stuff. God, I can't remember exactly what. Beatniks? I'll see if I can find something. You know what a beatnik is, right?
I know what a beatnik is. I just don't see what it has to do with
the beats.
Yeah.
Anyway, beats were kind of beatniks.
The point is,
Kilo tofu.
Yeah, the point of the matter is it's happened before and it's happening again, and it will go away probably.
It comes in waves. It's a fad.
Does.
It's a fad. The same way, you know what I mean? Fucking right now, beards and curly mustaches and skinny jeans are popular. In the next 6 years, something else is going to be popular, and the social minded aspect of it, the whole express yourself because the whole world is sexist and racist, that's going to pass on too, because it happened in the 90s and there was a flow of it, and all of college culture became very hyper aware of racial issues in America. And ever since then, that's been kind of like, oh, we grew up and we realized we have jobs and like shit actually matters in the real world. And that's what's going to happen here, because these are just, these are 25-year-old dudes living with their parents.
We're blaming bored college kids.
Yeah, they're the issue with everything always. So I don't think we're going to have to run into something, because the only problem is before, when they created the ESRB, these were people in power who were making comments about things. I mean, they were people who could affect the industry. Right now we have people who don't buy video games, and if they buy video games, they're not buying the video games, they're having the hand in censoring. They're going to move on. This will pass, is what I'm saying. It passed through comics, and it's still sort of lingering in there. These people move through like atheist movements and other underground movements.
You brought up comics. The comics code was created because of the outrage. Like, okay, all right, everybody calm down. We'll create this code, and everybody shut up. And then everybody shut up. So we did that with the ESRB, with video games. And maybe that's right. Maybe you're right about that, Jared. I kind of feel like something's going to happen. Something is going to be created, some kind of coalition, some kind of Twitter army. I don't know what you want to call it.
I don't think these people are well organized enough for a coalition.
I don't think they are,
lawyers.
And they're not in power.
This isn't
they don't
in the
have
courts.
power.
It's just true. These are just angry assholes on Twitter creating bad press.
Yeah, the ESRB had senators in court saying that what's that Sega CD game?
Night Trap.
Night Trap. They were. I mean, you know what I mean. That's what we had behind us at that point. We had people with real power. Now we have dudes with like beanies on this part of their head, growing shitty beards, saying like, "Oh, that's sexist." Those people aren't doing anything. They're not getting into Congress. You know what I mean?
They're just getting outraged, basically.
They're just outraged, and then what they're doing, and they're successful at, they're getting me pissed off on the internet, which I shouldn't be, because they're not affecting me in any way, shape, or form. Mm-hmm. Some of these games are coming out, and they are changes. And if we're being honest, and these RPGs, let's bring it back to RPGs. And these RPGs, there's small changes that aren't having such a huge effect on the story that it's worse off for it. But the whole point is like, where do you stop it? You know what I mean? But like I said, I don't think in the next 6 years this is going to be a conversation anybody's going to be having. I think it's going to move on to another hot button issue, but there's no threat right now from these people, aside from like bringing up Twitter and going, God fucking damn it. Other than that, I don't think there's any real effect as far as like a future problem with these people. They're gonna move on to whatever the fuck.
I think you're right, maybe, but I think there is something that's going on, and I think they are affecting the market right now. They are affecting the market. I mean,
they are affecting the market right now.
Countless games.
A lot of games, and we were just talking about a bunch of them, but I think that these effects are going to go away as these people stop paying attention to it. Because once these game companies stop seeing in the headlines, Square Enix, most sexist company on earth, they're going to stop putting out games to placate to an audience. And like I said, they're not buying their games. These are people, Square Enix is sexist. All right, well, don't play their games. I believe in a free market idea with
Meanwhile, we have,
vote with your wallet.
Other company, NIS and putting out the stuff like, Criminal Girls, and, there are games that are completely way out there.
Right.
Yeah. And it's important to point out also, a lot of like a super sexual video games sort of make me a little uncomfortable. I don't like them in my serious games because, you can have a sex scene in a game where two characters are like, oh, it's passion. You know what I mean? And then you have games like Criminal Girls where it's like, I wouldn't play that me personally, but I think everybody should have the right to if they choose to.
Oh, absolutely.
But at the same time, these
Senran Kagura 2 for the 3DS. I picked that up, and it wasn't as overtly like it was basically Boobs the game, but there was some pretty decent gameplay in it.
That's my wrestling name, by the way. Boobs the game.
Boobs the game. But then I picked up the PS4 one, and right from the get-go, it's just overtly, awkwardly sexual.
Which game is this?
And the new Senran Kagura, the one for PS4, and I couldn't get into it.
Yeah. No, I'm the same way. I'm the same exact way, but I'm also in the same boat. Like if there's a game that's only about social justice, pretty much. Have you guys heard of Read Only Memories? It's transsexual outrage. The game pretty much is just like, you play a trans character, and the whole fucking cyberpunk world's just got to get used to the fact that you look like a chicken or a dude or whatever, and that's fine because it's a fun game. It's pretty much Snatcher as seen by the social justice parade, which is cool.
Yeah, I'm interested. I'll play a game like that.
You should play it. It's actually super
alternate viewpoint. I don't mind that. I don't mind hearing it.
Well, not only that, it's just this really cool synthy, like cool sprite-based adventure game. So it's cool, and I think everybody should have a right to play that. And I don't agree with that game in any way. The same way I don't agree with games that are overtly sexual. But I think everybody should have the right to play these two games, and they're both on the opposite end of the spectrum.
Yeah,
I think. You know what I mean? And
that's the thing about with art is you don't want to censor anything because you want all viewpoints you want to challenge your audience's way of thinking, whether it's for something you agree with or something you don't agree with.
Right.
And you want to, you want to get away from like the ESRB. You want to get away from marketing restrictions that prevent people from putting out the really crazy shit.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
No, I'm in the same boat, and most of that didn't have to do with RPGs, but I think we kept it to like 24% ish. So just enough.
Not too
Maybe some RPG examples kept it relevant.
The end of that tangent is probably a pretty good place to call it, though, since we went a little bit over talking about social justice in video games. And to be fair, I do think it ties in just because in that subject, RPGs are normally kind of a hot button topic in that sense because they tend to be very buxom women and muscular men. So
can we end on nipples? Can we do that? Since we're talking about them?
The Jared classic. No. But at this point, since we're going to be wrapping it up, this is where I like to go around and have everybody plug where they can be reached and if they have any projects or anything they want to talk about. So why don't we go ahead and start with Daria?
All right. Well, I am Daria from Daria Plays. I tend to review RPGs, old and hopefully new sometime in the future. I do not talk about feminism or SWJs, so don't worry about that. And you can find my channel at youtube.com/DariaPlaysTOO.
There we go. And then how about you, Mr. Mike Tendo?
Yep, you can check me out on youtube.com/Dongold, where I do Pixel Tunes Radio, a video game music podcast, and also Dude, You Haven't Played This Game, which is a video game review show, retro and sort of some... Yeah, right. Sometimes newer games, but mostly just older stuff.
Awesome. How about you, Derek?
I am Super Derek, and you can find me on my channel, Super Derek RPGs, where I talk about RPGs. I also have a channel called Super Derek Streams, where I stream video games.
Mainly RPGs.
Check me out on those. Yeah, mostly RPGs there as well. It's good stuff. You should come check it out.
To be fair, I've been to some of those streams. Like, I know a lot of people are worried about RPG streams because they tend to be a little bit slower, but you do a good job of talking with the audience and stuff. I enjoy them a lot, so I can support that plug.
Thank you.
And then turning it over to the bearded monster himself, Mr. Avalanche Jared. Why don't we go ahead and throw that plug in?
Yeah, I'm Jared from Avalanche Reviews. You can find me at Avalanche Reviews on YouTube. Just search me up. I will be there on Twitter and Facebook, Avalanche Reviews also. You'll see me there. I review everything. RPGs, survival horror, first-person shooters. I do it all. Plus, I talk about a lot of this stuff we talked about before, a lot of the censorship and the real big issues in gaming today. So look me up.
And I'll admit that, too. I will always be surprised out of everybody in Multitapped, he's the one who never really shies away from that shit. Like, whenever on Saturdays we're all meeting up and we're like, oh my god, can you believe this, blah, 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 Nita Sarkeesian, blah, blah, blah. And we ramble about it, like, 4 days later, we see talking points like feminism in video games, racism in video games. So
I try my hardest to put it out there in a more structured and calm way than we did here on the podcast, because what I want it to be
a little more empirical.
Yeah, it's a little more kind of toned down a little bit, so it's an argument that you can take to somebody. Measured, that's a good word for it. That you could take to somebody and have a logical argument without yelling at each other, and that's what I hope to do with the Talking Points series. But if you go to YouTube and look up Avalanche Reviews, Talking Points, Trash Classics, you'll see them all there.
Awesome. And then for myself, I'm OneEye. You can see me around various multi-tab projects and things like that. You can also find me over on Twitter over at NA1Eye. I also do a show called The Guardians, which is primarily focused on Overwatch and all the balancing. A couple of episodes ago, we had a very large segment over the whole Buttgate and sexism in video games thing, too. So if anybody's interested, go ahead and check that out. And then the last plug for The Guardians, if anybody's actually interested in Overwatch, if you want to head over to my Twitter over at NA1Eye, we're doing a 8-copy giveaway for Overwatch, and that's free to enter. It's like a typical follow on YouTube sort of deal. So go ahead and head over there and enter if you're interested in winning some free games. And then from everybody at Multitap, thank you guys who watched us live. Thank you for everyone who's listening to the recordings or the videos later. And we will catch you next week, when next week's episode is going to be Test Your Might. And the lineup will be Mr. Lucius Showcase, Cobra Triangle himself, Jason from Arthur X Jason, Nico, the Wee Guy, and Benevolent Dick himself. So that'll be a good episode to catch, guys. And we will see you all next week.